Hey everybody, my name is Chandler Kitchen. Today we'll be talking about the universal design for learning in the classroom. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, as you look at your career in education, the different kinds of learners that you're going to come across in your classroom because no 10 students are the same, right? You're not going to have a classroom full of all the same students. We'll talk a little bit about that here today. Um, so first, let's talk about what is the universal design for learning. Well, it's actually kind of what it sounds like. Exactly, it's a universal design that is an approach in education at meeting the needs of more students. So when we have students that maybe have learning boundaries, be such as a slow reader, someone that's maybe got a harder home life or ADHD, something like that. This is an approach in education that can help to keep those students in the classroom with your general population students and how you can make it universal to their learning needs. It's helpful for many students, all students. It requires some extra time, but it's certainly worth it. Since you're a teacher, I'm assuming that you are in the business of impacting kids' lives. I want you to think for a moment about your potential classroom, the kinds of students that you might have. Maybe you have a student that's a slower reader, and that impacts his grades, and you can see that, and you know what's happening, and you can kind of distinguish that he's a slower reader. That's okay, and maybe you can get an audiobook that would help him out a little bit to maybe understand. Issues with home life. Maybe you see a student that has issues in home life, and maybe they just need someone to talk to. You can help out in that respect. Behavior problems with a student, ADHD, maybe lots of energy in the classroom. Just a few of the students you may come across in your classroom, because I want you to think about this classroom I have on the photo here for a second. That could be you standing at the front, all your students sitting there that are on different spectrums all at the same time, but learning the same content. So, how can you make it universal for each and every student that might be academically behind, maybe not think as fast, maybe thinking slower as far as where their grade level is? How can we make it universal for all those students? We're going to actually look at a few of these learning boundaries and what we can do. It may be better to facilitate them as educators and how we can help out these students in the classroom. So let's talk a moment. I have a soft spot for this one. Students with a harder family life. I live in kind of part of western Kansas, and I actually work in a school district, and I've seen a lot of this. Just students that have a harder home life, and whether that's mom and dad getting a divorce. That's something I went through in elementary school, and and man, that could be hard when you're young and you're trying to just figure out what's going on. Why are mom and dad at different places? Um, and that could definitely impact the behavior of the students and how they feel about school. And maybe these students don't have as much time outside of school to work. Maybe they're just thinking about everything that's happening at home while they're at home, and they don't want to think about school. Maybe they just don't have parents that really care that much. My parents love me dearly, I know they do, but they didn't care about my schoolwork. So it was always something that I had to do myself independently, which wasn't a bad thing. Um, but I know there's some students there that would struggle with that. Students that kind of need that, piggyback once in a while, and that's okay. And I want to tackle how we can look at students that maybe have a harder family life. And that is maybe take them aside 15 minutes after school and say, hey, you want to go over some of the content we went in class? A one on one session sometimes is what that student needs, because academically they could be so far behind, but it's just this little way that you can help to help bring them up a little more, because you might be the only teacher that does that for that student. Um, a little bit about learning barriers here for students. I thought this was some interesting statistics I read earlier in our modules. Students with a learning disability, the dropout rate for them is 20%, with some kind of learning disability versus 8% of the general population of students. So what can we do to help prevent these students from dropping out? That's double. And I think it's because students are they're frustrated with the learning barriers. They're frustrated that it's just not really universal to them and their learning needs, and that they learn in a different way, and that their strengths are different. What worked in the classroom 30 years ago, in my opinion, doesn't work the same today. And I think technology is a huge thing for students today. Um, I remember, and this reminds me of the middle school days. There was a program that came out. It was called Edmodo, and that's when social media started being huge, and students just wanted to be on social media. That's all we wanted to do. So they designed Edmodo for in the classroom to use, but it looked exactly like Facebook. Well, we loved using Facebook, so it felt like Facebook, and it was just a way to make it universal in a sense to us to say, I feel like I'm on Facebook, but I'm actually doing schoolwork. It was kind of individualizing the way we learned. Though we still learned the contents, we just learned it in a different way. Technology is huge, huge, huge. Videos, audio, digital audio programs for students to listen to, audio books, Microsoft Word, huge one. Microsoft Word has a cool text to type feature, so you literally just tell it. That's great for students who may have some visual issues. And then PowerPoint, of course, that we're on right now. Students learn at their own pace with these individualized programs. Maybe you've got a student that learns better watching a video. Maybe you've got a student who can't see very well, so they'd work better listening to a podcast. Just a few of those things. Another learning barrier I want to talk about, anxiety. Some students may have test anxiety. They may have PTSD. They might have separation anxiety. I can see that being impactful maybe at the elementary level more. Students are coming to school and they're away from their parents, and that's all they're thinking about. And maybe they're falling behind in their academics because of that. And maybe you as a teacher can pull them aside and say, hey, we're working in school right now. Your parents, you're going to get to see them here very soon. Let's hang out with our friends at recess and let's go have some fun. And this is something that might not work out of the gate. Um, it's going to take some time. And students want to talk a little bit about maybe what you might see with a student that has anxiety, possibly some aggression, acting out, bullying, very possible, and that's very possible with all of these. Um, I wanted to talk about that a little bit. It's very possible with all these learning barriers that we've been talking about today. I think students act out because they are frustrated that they have these learning barriers that they feel like they can't control, and they feel like they're being so left out of the classroom. And I think that impacts what they think of themselves and what they think others think of themselves. And it's really becoming a problem I've seen, that we just need to do more, and it's hard to. It's hard, man, with the this universal education we're talking about, being impactful to each and every one of your students. But that's part of the gig of being a teacher, right? We want to impact kids as much as possible. We talked a little bit about this one already, but maybe you have students that have visual impairments, allowing for podcasts in class, as I mentioned earlier. I think group work is great for some of these different groups we've talked about with the learning um, boundaries and the things that help them most. Allowing for more group work can totally help them. Text to speech. I got ahead of myself a little bit, but that's helping with students as well that maybe has some visual issues, and it's harder for them just to speak and express themselves that way. So that is a few of the learning barriers that I wanted to talk about today, and the universal design for learning in the classroom, and how we as educators can be more individualized for our students, and the universal design for learning. Once again, an approach in education at meeting the needs of more students, and how we can impact all of our students in our classroom.